Hello, this is Robyn speaking. Good afternoon and welcome to this live webinar. It's Robyn here, part of the team based at Wellington for Young Enterprise Trust. So we've all just finished attending Enterprise Day, and you're probably wondering where to from here. There's a lot of information at eDay, and in this webinar I'll go through the next steps with Lion Foundation Young Enterprise Scheme. This webinar is suitable for teachers and students, so if you want to play this later on or give access to other people, you will be able to do that after the live recording. I'd like to just acknowledge our principal sponsor, the Lion Foundation. Obviously without their assistance we wouldn't have this amazing program to offer, and also of course to acknowledge Magpie Media, who will be hosting our webinar session today. So let's get into it. For the last couple of weeks it's been my pleasure to be around New Zealand with Sasha, meeting all you awesome YES students and teachers who are participating this year. At that active one-day workshop, students had the opportunity to brainstorm their potential product or service ideas, and also to meet their regional coordinator and the other students in their region who will form obviously their competitors, their network, and their collaborators and colleagues for this year. It was fantastic to meet you all. So after eDay we really need to get focused on the national timeline. Regionally there will be events that your coordinator will tell you about, so I'm going to focus on the general timeline for Young Enterprise nationally. And on your screen you'll see the timeline from now until June. This is on the student resource page for anybody who's looking for it. Obviously at the middle of the year we've focused on students moving on to a Dragon's Den pitch for their business. That date will be around May or June, and again set by your regional coordinator. And there'll be another webinar in early June too where we focus on the second half of the YES year after those Dragon's Den. The first thing I just want to do a reminder about is asking teachers to please register your student teams as soon as possible. The early bird registration closes on Friday the 28th of March, which is Friday week. When the teams are registered, we then send by email a company registration certificate, and that means that students have that proof that they're in the scheme and can set up a bank account. Teachers, you should have received a spreadsheet to register students. If for some reason that hasn't arrived in your inbox, please contact us either by calling or emailing support, and we'll see that that gets out to you. Also, of course, a friendly reminder that student fees this year have remained at $35, which is just a small cost of the total cost of running this scheme, and we really appreciate you starting to gather that from directors ready for payment. We won't invoice until the end of term 1, and really would appreciate the payment. We are a not-for-profit, and that donation is very much looked forward to. I've just moved on now to the student handbook that hopefully you all received at eDay. If you need more, please contact us, or this is also online. At eDay that program book should have reached you, and it has a lot of basic information that you should reference during the year, including this section on page 12, which tells you how to access the student resources and also the link to the Class of 2014 Facebook. Both teachers and students are invited to join this group, and we really encourage you teachers to remind students to like that page and to ask to join the group, because this is our main way of communicating national news and events, and again it's a way for us to share the student experiences and examples of their business during the year. As well, in that booklet from page 16 there is the criteria for the national competition and also the 15 Excellence Awards that are on offer this year. We're going to have a look at the book on page 6 onwards, just go through each of those things for term 1 that are referenced there. And the first, of course, is reading the YES Constitution. I think it's really important both for managing directors and teachers that you make it a point of highlighting that Constitution and kind of going through it at your first meeting, because there is a lot covered there about the rules of operating your YES business, and some of these things may come up during the year, and we have had examples of both managing directors and teachers asking about things that are covered in the Constitution and saying, gosh, I wish we'd known that that was in the Constitution earlier because it's highlighted a way we could have dealt with an issue. So all your teams and all your YES companies operate under the YES Constitution. It sets out the rules for the company. A YES company is not a registered company, but the Constitution is legal and it does provide a legal framework for the students to operate under. So each student director has equal shareholding and equal voting rights, and the company directors can only be students who are actively enrolled in that company under the responsibility of their YES teacher. So YES directors can't employ people, they can't employ themselves and pay wages, they are restricted to operating as equal shareholders. The Constitution, however, does allow for other investors, so therefore students can make honorary shareholders who can inject capital into the company. Those shareholders don't have voting rights and they can't make decisions on the business, and it doesn't give them rights to actually make decisions about the business. So there is a section as well in the Constitution about HR issues that may arise and also on intellectual property. So it's a really good idea to go through this with the directors at the start of the year and particularly highlight the management of the behaviour, I guess, for each director and how that can be dealt with, and also the area on intellectual property, because those are probably two of the main areas where questions might arise during the year. Okay, so once you've had a look at the Constitution, the next thing on the list is assigning roles to each student shareholder in the company. And a lot of companies will have done that already at the E-Day or before they came to E-Day, or may have already done this subsequent to the E-Day already. So this is just a reminder to teachers that in the teacher's manual there are some lessons that help students in terms of actually identifying perhaps characteristics for each role, skill sets, and also some lessons on team building. Each team will have the following YES roles. They'll have a CEO or a managing director, CEO or Chief Excitement Officer as we like to call them, who main role really is, I guess, overseeing the whole business for the year and the team and standing up in terms of leadership. Then a finance director, sales and marketing, communications and production. Now depending on how many people are in the company, those roles may be allocated where there's multiple roles for one director or where there's more than one director in a role, and that's entirely up to the team. We do have a limit of the maximum of 10 people in a company. I would suggest that's rather large, and the average team tends to be around between 4 and 6. Okay, so if we go back to the timeline, in the month of March, all directors should really plan to take responsibility now for their specific directorship and perhaps really step up to that role. And by April, we'd expect that all directors will be helping with market research and bonding together as a team and starting to focus on finding out that information. So whilst as an individual director you might be taking on the responsibilities, remember all the way through the business everybody is responsible for helping out, and particularly in the marketing area and the sales area, that's quite critical that everybody is taking part. On the screen, I'm actually showing a document that is part of the teaching resources that are available to teachers in their resource centre. This outlines all the responsibilities across the year for each directorship, and obviously it's a general guide, but it can be really helpful to print this, and a lot of teachers will do that. Blow it up and put it on the wall in the classroom, and it can be quite a useful document for helping directors see what sort of roles they're responsible for and when those should actually kick into the business. So for example, on the screen we might see that the CEO will need to start officially running formal meetings overseeing the action plans, starting to think about any intellectual property, and lead and start to coordinate the running of the business. For financial folk, the role might be starting to look at opening the bank account, looking at the costings perhaps for your product and doing some research around that, and maybe starting to look at alternative sources of funding and fundraising. And on the screen at the moment we've got roles for sales and marketing and comms. So that might be a starting point both for CEOs and for teachers. The first term is really all about planning, and obviously it's a very busy term. So the next thing on the list really is to start holding those regular board meetings where key decisions are made. This is a process that most teachers will run in class, and it gives them a chance to listen in on those meetings, see where formal decisions are being made, and that also maybe mentors could be involved in those meetings, or if this is an extracurricular run activity, those meetings might be run at a specific time where the teacher can participate, or it might be with mentors. Again, that would be up to you. There's no right or wrong time frame in terms of how many meetings there should be. A weekly meeting may be too much once things have kicked into action, and it could be that every fortnight there's a formal meeting. Again, that's entirely up to the team and the teacher. I think the important thing about those formal meetings is that they should be run efficiently and effectively. So how do you do that? To help along the way, there is actually a podcast on conducting a meeting. It's only about 5 minutes long, and it's certainly well worth watching to help you understand the process of what a formal meeting is and how that would run. That podcast is on the student resource page, and I've flicked to that now, and again that link is in your handbook. And there's a lot of information on that page, but particularly there is the podcast about holding meetings, and also an agenda template and a meeting minutes template. So really the main thing to remember about the minutes is that this is where all formal decisions should be discussed and decisions should be minuted. For example, if you're making a decision about whether to use an overseas supplier at a certain rate or a New Zealand supplier for your product at a certain price, that discussion and that decision should be minuted, and hopefully then all of those decisions can be referenced back formally rather than informally made and people aren't sure how that decision was arrived at. The minutes record those decisions and those discussions, and again the minutes shouldn't be recording every word but just again the main points that are decided. So download those templates if you haven't done so already and start to use those to record both your minutes and also your agenda. Depending on what credit pathway, if any, is being conducted in the school, the company minutes may also contribute towards assessment. So they are always a reference point and evidence for students carrying out the business. So again, for both teachers and students, it's good to get into the habit of keeping those agendas and those minutes in your portfolio. Regional coordinators would also like to get a copy of your meeting minutes, maybe not all the time, but certainly once a term they will be giving marks out for those. So make sure that when you're circulating the minutes to your team members, to your mentor, that maybe you also copy in your coordinator. Let's talk about mentors. There's things called mentors and also expert advisors, and both can play a really key role in your company. We strongly recommend that companies have a business mentor and that they make an effort to perhaps find that person themselves first, because it is a personal relationship and you want to make sure that you're comfortable with the person that's helping out your business. Maybe at the E-Day you may have met somebody that you'd like to approach. If so, that's fine. You might have their contact already, and if not, as a starting point, please go back to your regional coordinator and ask for contacts. If you didn't have a mentor and you'd like help to find one, again, your regional coordinator is the first point of contact. But here at HQ we've got a lot of volunteers who are happy to perhaps put their hand up to be a mentor, and that might be by Skype, or it might be that there's somebody locally who we have on our database. So again, if you're looking for a mentor and you'd like help, please don't hesitate to sing out to us to get some assistance with that. A mentor can help you generally throughout the year with your business, but it may be that you also want to engage experts along the way. For example, if you need a production advisor or a marketing advisor, you might want to engage other experts with that particular expertise. We know that the teams who have mentors usually end up doing very well, because those networks that a mentor has are networks that you can also tap into, and that just might be the difference between you finding a producer or a national supplier or a national distributor. And I've got on the screen there a little quote from a Yes team at Kingsway who had Matt Lilly as a mentor. On the other side, I guess, sometimes you need to be a bit mindful that the mentor is operating in a way that helps your business and not taking over. So to help with this, we like to kind of set some guidelines for mentors about what the expectations should be, both from their point of view and from the student's point of view. So to help with that, there is a webinar running later this month that it might be useful for you to circulate to your mentors, or later on to reference to your mentors so that they know what's expected. And they can sign up for that on our website. And if, again, that webinar is happening on the 24th of March at 4 o'clock. Back to term one. So going back to the handbook, the next thing on our list is opening your bank account, and it was fabulous to see so many banks turning up across the country. So I know that in some regions the banks came to you with packs and said, let's open up your bank account on the spot, and in some regions that may not have happened, and you will need to go and find a bank to set up your Yes bank account. It's a really good idea, if there isn't a partner bank in your region, to ask a variety of banks whether they would be happy to give you a free fee account for your Yes company. And if you are going in to set up your account, you'll probably find you're going to need to take in 2 directors who will be signatories on that account, and also 2 lots of identification like a passport, driver's license, birth certificate, so that all the business can be done via an appointment. Having 2 signatories is just good business practice, and it makes it a safeguard for you, the finance director, and also for the business, so that you know, there's less chance of fraud, and it's good record keeping, and means that 2 people have to sign off any money that's going out. And again, teachers sometimes like to be a signatory. That's your call. So once that bank account's set up, hopefully you've got some funds that you might be able to transfer in there, and we'll get to fundraising within this webinar as well. The next 2 sections I'm going to talk about together, because they're things that are kind of done collectively. So coming up with your product and your service idea, researching and planning that business are all things that happen at the same time. And we talked about developing the product and the service obviously at E-Day, and I was incredibly impressed with the number of companies that came this year with their ideas already researched or ideas on the plate to consider, and also for those students who came to E-Day perhaps without ideas, who then formulated Plan A and Plan B, as we like to call it, so that they could start to research their products quite quickly. So just a bit of a recap, I guess. We talked about manufacturing, where your product might be made. We talked about logistics and distribution, which is how you're going to get your product from where it's made to your customer. So those are the sorts of details that you should be starting to discuss at your meetings. And again, it's not the responsibility of the production director to make all those decisions and to investigate all of that. I'd suggest that while they're going to keep their eye on that process, that it's important for every member of the team to really know what the business model is for your product. So those are the things that I'd suggest you might put on the agenda: marketing, research and production for your meeting. So the timing is really important as well. Setting a timeline is really important because it starts to identify the key points for where your business should be at in terms of production, and helps you to plan your marketing and your launch and to start to have some checkpoints along the way for where your business should be at. One of the things, the sorts of decisions I guess that you'll be making is producers of a product, is things like who's going to be making your product. And if you're researching and you're finding that you might be importing goods from offshore, just a reminder to check the import criteria and tariffs that might apply to your product. Generally, you'll find that countries where New Zealand has a trade arrangement with, that might be easier in terms of importing, but there's not one rule about where tariffs apply, so please make sure you do that research thoroughly so that you aren't surprised with import costs for your particular product. And we do have a little bit of information on that again on the student resource page, and I suggest that you have a look at that as a first point and then maybe go to the websites that are in that resource to check out what applies to your product. Of course, one of the decisions could be that you have to pay a little bit more and have your production onshore in New Zealand, and I guess the benefit of that is that you've got a little bit more control over that process. So these are the sorts of decisions that you should make as a team and discuss before you go ahead with your decisions. So we're going to talk now a little bit about market research, which happens at the same time. So again, these are two activities, both production decisions and market research and planning, that your group should probably be doing together. And market research is obviously really critical. We've talked about this again at E-Day, really identifying that ideal customer, and then after that starting to plan your brand, but I would suggest that that's something you might leave until after you've done your marketing plan. And I'm going to talk a little bit now about how these two activities, both marketing and planning, come into the achievement standards if these are being taught. So if you are not doing achievement standards, this is general information that you might want to listen into, but some of it will not apply. I guess the first thing is that teachers, I hope you've been using the resources that are there for free download, and our apologies if some of you had issues in getting those to print. We think we've fixed the gremlin, and if you are still having any problems, please just call us and we'll do a print and post for you. But in terms of planning and research for the achievement standards, I know a lot of students had already started to collect their secondary data by the time the E-Days came around. That is, that they had researched their product and the market that they thought they might be entering into and started to look at relevant websites, maybe at statistics, even made contact with industry expert or looked at industry publications, and all of that secondary data is really an important part of the research process. So this again is maybe where reaching out to those expert advisors might be helpful, because that could also be considered as secondary data. So for example, if your product is food-based, maybe you need to talk to a food technologist, a food producer, it could be a human nutritionist, or it might even be people who are experts in packaging. So again, all of those experts can provide advice that's relevant to your product and help you in your research about how that product might be made and what some of the barriers might be, or even hopefully provide some of the solutions. Again, if you don't know how to find those people, we're happy to help here at HQ, or ask your regional coordinator for the sorts of industry connections they've got locally. Your mentors as well, it's surprising how many networks they have, so if you do have a mentor, use their links, use any links that you can to find that advice. Then the second thing is planning how you might be collecting any primary data, and by primary data of course we mean surveys, questionnaires, focus groups, thinking about the sorts of questions that you need to ask, the methods that you might be asking those questions, how many surveys or questionnaires, if that's your methodology, that you're going to need to get answered so that you actually get very reliable data. And I think we mentioned that it's not good enough just to ask a handful of people, that you need to make sure you're asking the right sample number of people to get really reliable feedback on your particular customer, product or service. So for those who are completing the achievement standards, don't forget to take notes throughout this process about why you made those decisions, in other words, why you chose those methods of research, and keep track of all of the different sources that you used for your research to find out about your market and about your product. Because again, it's going to be important when you do your assessment that you can justify the decisions that you've made and explain them. How you present your data for your assessment at level 2, if you're completing the marketing research achievement standard, is up to your teacher. It might be that you're asked to present this data in a presentation to class, and that's a really good way of practicing your presentation for Dragon's Den. Regardless of how you present your data, all of this market research will form part of the business plan for the level 2 carry out a business standard. And for that particular standard, you are required to write a business plan that will be an ongoing document that you'll review during the year. At level 3, if you're completing the marketing standard and writing a marketing plan, this research will form a major part of that assessment, and when researching your market for the level 3 assessment, you can use any one of the tools, Porter's 5 Forces model, a Boston matrix, PEAST, etc., and summarise your findings about your place in the market in a SWOT analysis. Then you can go on to prepare your marketing strategy that details your plans for distribution, for price, for promotion, etc. If you're completing at level 3 the marketing plan and the carry out a business standard, then your teacher will advise you whether the evidence for carrying out your business will include a business plan. If it does, then your marketing plan is giving you a significant amount of content for a business plan, and you should find that relatively easy to flesh out. Now, for any teacher or student, regardless of whether you're doing an achievement standard or not, there's a really great PowerPoint on marketing, courtesy of Andrea Cottrell, a YES teacher, who's provided that for us in the Teacher Resource Centre. So for anybody who wants to look at that for help, please go into the Resource Centre and download it. So I'm just showing here Mike McRoberts, not in his usual TV3 news appearance, but obviously in his being a journalist, and a key lesson from him was listening to your customer, and I guess that's the point that all teams should remember. Particularly if your team is completing achievement standards, then you're going to be reviewing your business plan, and if you're doing your marketing research obviously and planning your strategies, you want to go back to your customers or your focus groups and keep researching and verifying that the plans you're making fit with your customer. It's important that every member of the team conducts market research. That is, that everybody looks at the research methods, decides on them, plans them, and helps in the research and the analysis. Leave the logo and the branding until later, and research should really be the main focus for every YES company, whether you're doing an achievement standard or not. Intellectual property. There's a lot of questions often about this, so again, look at the resource that's online first. There is a confidentiality, it's a very hard word to say, a confidentiality disclosure agreement there, and I would suggest that that's all you probably need at this stage when you go out to discuss your ideas with potential suppliers, because the reality is that getting a patent is not necessarily the first thing you should be doing. It's expensive, it can be complicated, and it certainly isn't recommended at this early stage of your business. So intellectual property is a question that we get asked about a lot, and all of the products and services that you develop as a YES company are your intellectual property of all the directors, but it does take an enormous amount of money to protect businesses, patents, brands, logos, etc. So don't rush to that as your first thought, but use that confidentiality disclosure agreement to give yourself some initial protection. Teachers in the manual on page 87 to 91, there's quite a bit of information there about tasks associated with IP and protection. Again, just going back to that planning, I said there was a lot to do this term. So one of the activities, of course, is starting to generate some startup funds. And I know that a lot of teams are out there already and done a little bit of fundraising, and that's fantastic to see. So if you haven't done that already, it's a good team building exercise, and the usual traditional ways of raising money, selling food, all those usual fundraising activities, car washes, you name it, they've been used year in, year out, and I guess you need to check with other groups in your school, whatever the policy is, on what you can do to raise funds. But don't forget about asking people if they want to invest as your plans start to cement up a little bit. In terms of startup funds, it's really up to the YES team to decide on how that will be raised from within the team members. I can appreciate that for a lot of students they don't have a lot of capital to put into the business, so have that discussion about what's realistic, and make a decision amongst you about, if you are investing your own money, what's a realistic fee that could be. You are going to be dealing with real money and real profit and loss. So as I mentioned, all YES directors are equal shareholders in any profit, regardless of who you thought came up with the initial idea. Everybody in the business owns that intellectual property and equally shares in any profit. YES companies are actually exempt from the usual company income tax, PAYE, ACC, etc., and all the usual company taxes. Instead, we ask YES companies to pay a YES tax of 25% on reported profit in their annual review, and this money goes towards helping us to run our coordinator network so that other students can participate in the future. Another way that you might be able to get some seeding capital is if you are a Pacifica team that's with half of your team members who identify as Pacifica. The Ministry of Pacific Island Affairs do offer a seed fund, and they take applications from Pacifica teams, and those will close on the 9th of May, and again an application form will be on the student resource page, or call us if you can't find it. Talk about managing the money. Of course, our sponsor Xero, through our alumni Rod Jury, is happy to offer you a free subscription this year to use Xero, and again, to receive that free subscription you need to sign up by entering the promo code that's in your student booklet. Also on the student resource page there is a podcast about, there's some setup notes, and there's actually a chart of accounts that have been organised to be relevant for use companies that Xero have put there for you to use as well. So it'd be great to see you guys making use of that. It certainly makes the management of your finances and your reporting quite simple. So term 2, what's coming up is of course a move into focus on production and marketing, and I know that term 1 is really busy, but the more energy that all of the team can put into researching possible partners for your product, the much more likely it'll be that you can, 1, make a decision about whether you're going ahead with plan A if it's a rather complicated product, or switching to plan B, which hopefully is a simpler option for you. And also the better your marketing research is, the easier it should be for you to plan your marketing activities and for them to be successful. The marketing assessments for level 2 and 3 should be focused on at this time of the year, and then those should be finished so that students can move on to focusing on the carry out of business assessments. On the 18th of June we will be running a mid-year review for YES, and this will particularly look at the delivery of the achievement standards. So more details will be on our website about that, but please tune into those as a bit of a checkpoint for how that assessment is going. So the final thing that I just want to talk about, I guess, is working hard on that planning in term 1. We've covered a lot today in a very short time, so I guess the main thing is please reach out where you start to perhaps strike those speed bumps, and that applies to a teacher as well as the students. If you do find that students are struggling in terms of finding partners or mentors, I'm certainly not saying we've got all the answers, but we're really happy to reach out through our database and our networks to try and find you the expertise and the advice that might make those products turn from ideas to reality. And I think that's all we've got. We've got through everything today, so in fact there is time for questions. So I'm going to ask Helen to come back to us now, and if there have been any questions I will do my best to answer those, and thank you for listening.
Okay, we don't have any questions come through this afternoon, Robyn. There's a lot of information.
Easy. There is a lot of information there, so again, just if there are questions after the fact, our support team email showing on the screen now, as well as our phone number here in Wellington, and again my email is there also, so please do feel free to email and ask us anything, and to pass it on to students. We're really happy to get their inquiries as well. So I guess, Helen, if there's no questions, it just remains to say thank you to everybody for listening, and again to acknowledge and thank you, Helen, and the team at Magpie Media for bringing us the webinar, and to wish everybody the very best for term 1, and good luck for the rest of the term. Thanks, Helen.
Great, thanks, Robyn, and I'll end the webinar for everybody this afternoon, so I'll count you out. 4, 3, 2, 1. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.